Hello, fiendlings, how the hell are ya? Welcome to the first episode of my horror novel, Sacculina. What is Sacculina? I guess the closest thing I can compare it to would be Invasion of the Body Snatchers, although there are some major differences. Now, as you may have noticed in the disclaimer, this story has body horror. While it's not a particularly gory book, there are some scenes that might bother squeamish folks. You've been warned. Also, it has some sex. Be prepared for that too. A Sacculina audiobook should soon be in the Audible and related stores later this month. I'll let you know when it's ready for you. Well, let's kick this puppy off. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again next Friday. Here's episode 1 of Sacculina. Chapter 1. The large yacht, Persephone, cut through the water with the vibration of engines and the drunken clamor of the passengers. Bill and his wife sat on one of the couches while the sun beat down on the tonneau, drawing beads of sweat from their pores. Cushions and seats covered the flybridge's starboard side, while the port side housed the wet bar and the nav station. Several bottles of liquor sat in the racks above the wet bar sink. Most were half full. The whiskey, Bill knew, was at least $250 a shot at a craft bar, and the tequila at least $100 a shot. He shuddered to think what a bottle cost, and these idiots were drinking it as though they were 14 and pounding Mad Dog. Most of the passengers were on their 4th or 5th whiskey, glass of wine, or shot of tequila. That didn't even address the coke he was sure someone was snorting in the head, nor the THC vapes everyone seemed to have. Short-lived clouds of vapor shot up from the other 4 passengers in fits and starts like a poorly maintained diesel tractor. Never should have taken Green up on this, Bill thought. These people are not my tribe. That was certainly true. Bill, a software architect for Green Industries, wanted nothing to do with crypto bros, semi-sociopathic executives, or people who preferred cocktail parties to a dive bar. But Green had been insistent, and when the multi-billionaire owner of the company said, "Thou shalt," thou didst, even if it meant an uncomfortable few days with people he didn't know. Philip, the self-proclaimed crypto prince, sat on a cushion by himself, his girlfriend standing beside him. The raven-haired early 20-something woman had a sparkling smile and dull cow eyes that spoke to drunkenness or being stoned. Probably both. Despite having to listen to the conversations, he was glad they were beneath the tonneau and not on the bow. He had applied plenty of sunscreen, but as the wind, ocean spray, and sweat combined, he wondered how long it would last. He didn't want to get burned. Not this early in the vacation. Like himself, Ellen had chosen to wear a baggy sunshirt and leggings rather than don shorts and a tee. She didn't want to get burned either. She held her vodka tonic in one hand while the other twined with his. Every now and then, she'd squeeze his fingers as if to reassure him, or maybe herself. Then again, maybe it was her way of expressing frustration over having to listen to this inane, repetitive, circular argument. Bill might as well be in an executive design meeting. "And that's why those exchanges crashed," Philip said. "I mean, we're not anarchists." "Says you." Russ, a company exec at a popular software company, glowered at Philip. "You'll destroy the damn banking system. Remember El Salvador?" Philip rolled his eyes. "Every one of you non-believers brings that up. El Salvador did it stupidly. We'll be smarter." Russ shook his head in disbelief before looking over at Bill. "You got anything to add?" Bill managed a weak smile. "Finance isn't my bailiwick, but I do have major security concerns." "There, see?" Russ put a hand on his wife's knee and squeezed, gently. Bill couldn't decide if it was a sign of affection or merely to reassure himself she was still there. "The software guy says you're crazy." Bill suddenly wanted to climb overboard. "I didn't say that. I said..." "The software guy," Philip said, his friendly drunken smile no longer so friendly, "didn't say that." He stifled a belch, muttered something, and glowered at Russ. "Security is something that needs to be shored up, sure, but that's the entire banking industry, not just crypto." "Whatever," Russ said. "We'll respectfully agree to disagree." Philip snickered, gesturing to the yacht. "Another pump or two, and I'll be able to afford one of these babies." "Or you could just work," Russ said under his breath. Bill fought a smirk, barely one, and turned to Ellen. She looked bored and a little anxious. "Ready for a stroll around the boat?" "Yes," she said gratefully, and offered him her hand. "Excuse us," Bill said softly. He and Ellen stood from their chairs and walked to the short, steep staircase. As they passed below the flybridge deck, Bill heard Philip starting in again about some meme coin. Holy shit, am I glad we escaped that. He led her to the port side where they were still protected from the sun. That guy probably masturbates to the crypto exchange prices, Ellen whispered above the engines and the grinding ocean. Bill grinned. Probably worse than that. Still not as bad as being locked up with him in a boat for a morning. Could be worse. Ellen raised a brow and squeezed his hand. And how exactly could it be worse? Bill said flatly, his eyes narrowing. You could be stuck on an island with him. Oh. Ellen squeezed again, this time much harder, her nails indenting into his palm. Shit, I forgot about that. Chuckling, he put an arm around her waist and kissed her. We'll ignore him. It's a large enough island to make that possible. Sure, Ellen said, but I might drown him if he talks about crypto while we're snorkeling. The word gave him a chill. He'd always wanted to try it, and now was finally his chance. Only problem? He wasn't that great of a swimmer. Ellen had told him it wouldn't be a problem. She'd make sure of it. He trusted her, but not himself. Why did they let you talk me into this? Ellen asked. He shrugged sheepishly. Because I didn't want to come alone? Uh-huh, she said, her mock anger making him smile. 5 days with these assholes? Keep in mind that we're guests of my boss's boss's boss. Ellen tousled her blonde hair. You hate marketing. You loathe crypto people. Yes, he sighed. I do, but they're guests like we are. Well, don't take any shit from them. You're an executive too, she reminded him. He shook his head, fighting the swell of anger suddenly burning in his stomach. Not like him. I certainly don't make that kind of money. I'm glad. You were an asshole when you got promoted. Can't imagine how insufferable you'd be if you were chief architect and pulling down 7 figures. He chuckled and squeezed her hip. That still might happen. Anything's possible. The pair went silent as they stared out over the ocean. There weren't any boats in the area, at least none that he could see, and he suddenly felt very small. The 90-foot yacht, with berths for 12, had seemed huge when they boarded it. But now that the ocean was all he could see in every direction, he realized the boat was nothing more than a speck on a seemingly infinite plain. He shivered at the thought. She touched his hand, and he clenched his fingers around hers. Ellen leaned in and kissed him gently on the cheek. At least I'll finally get some alone time with you. Alone time. He'd been working 90-hour weeks for the past several months, designing and implementing a new security model for Green's flagship software product. He and 3 developers had managed to make it happen, but the project had been understaffed from the get-go. Combined with not enough design time, the crunch had been awful. One developer's husband had threatened divorce if it happened again. That was the reason he and Ellen were even on this boat, let alone heading to one of Green's private islands. The multi-billionaire occasionally rewarded heroic efforts by plebeians like Bill. Cash, new cars, trips to private islands, and even the occasional new house were all possibilities. With that kind of money, Green could buy anything he wanted, and probably anyone he wanted, Bill thought. She squeezed his ass and he started, looking at her in surprise. What was that for? For later, she said, leaned in and kissed him deeply. I'm still hoping for a Bill Jr., you know. He blushed and she squeezed him again. He was suddenly glad he faced the gunwale while his erection pointed out of his sunpants like a battering ram. Changing the subject, he said, Brandon told me we'll be eating lunch an hour or 2 after we hit the island. Guess after that we can have a nap. And playtime? Bill shook his head with a gentle smile, cheeks flushed. Yes, ma'am. Playtime. She grazed the bulge in his shorts with her fingers, and he sighed. Just don't keep me waiting too long. No, ma'am, he said softly and kissed her. Bill moved to embrace her, and the constant engine growl lowered into an aggressive purr. The pair swayed with the boat as it decelerated. Brandon, the first mate, appeared at the sliding aft door and grinned at them. Hey, you want to see something cool? Bill liked Brandon. The yacht's first mate had wild hair and kind eyes and seemed enthusiastic about everything. Bill didn't know what kind of paycheck he was pulling down from Green, but it must be big. Either that or Brandon thought he had the best job in the world. Sure, Ellen said. What is it? Brandon pointed starboard. Go to the gunwale and take a look. Ellen and Bill exchanged glances before she went to the gunwale and looked over. She said something and then turned to him. You're not going to believe this. What? He asked, joining her at the gunwale and looking over. Before he could ask her again what he was supposed to be looking at, he saw them. A few dozen blue and purple crystalline sails poked out of the water, their rugose and ridged crowns glittering in the sunlight. Wow, he said. Those are huge. What are they? Portuguese man-of-war. She shook her head and pointed at them. But they're not supposed to be that big. He'd heard of the creatures, but had never seen one. The sails had to be at least 3 feet high and 2 feet wide. A few looked even larger. How big do they get? Never seen one bigger than a foot long. Those bastards are at least 4. He put his arm around her waist. They, sting, don't they? Yes, like really bad. He fought another shiver. Good thing we're up here. The yacht passed within 30 feet of the nearest of the flotilla before the engines resumed their growl and the boat gently accelerated. They watched the school of man-of-war recede into the distance. The boat changed course slightly, and he breathed a sigh of relief. He'd been suddenly terrified those things were following them and would wash ashore on the island, or greet them while they were snorkeling. Weird. Never seen anything like that. Was, something, Bill said dumbly. He was still trying to process the size of the creatures. Guess I should be impressed. Should be. Those were big. Bill said. Now I feel inadequate. Ellen turned to him and put her arms around his neck. You shouldn't, and later you'll show me why. He searched for something to say, but in the end only kissed her. The sound of deck shoes clopping down the stairs caught his ears, and he sighed heavily. Autumn and Russ appeared, their drinks refreshed. Sorry to intrude, Russ said as he and his wife walked to join them. He pointed out at the quickly receding creatures. That was something, wasn't it? Sure was, Ellen said. Bill opened his mouth to agree, suddenly feeling stupid, and said nothing. Bill, right? Russ asked. Bill wanted to roll his eyes. This wasn't the first exec he'd met who couldn't retain someone's name for more than 2 minutes at a time. Yeah, and you're Russ. Russ beamed as if Bill had pulled off some kind of magic trick. The man was obviously half drunk. That's right. The upside-down pineapples gracing his Hawaiian meant something, but Bill couldn't remember what. Do you know Green? Not really, Bill said, his erection now long gone. He turned to face Russ and Autumn. I've met him once or twice, but that's about it. Did it include drinking? Russ asked suspiciously. Yeah? Company events. Ah, yes, Russ said knowingly. You must have done something damned important to be here. Bill felt another blush coming and staunched it. I fixed a problem, that's all. Russ grinned. Big, important problem, obviously. Bill managed a genuine smile. It was, actually. Can't talk about it, but let's say it saved us some money. Like millions and millions in lawsuits, he thought. Gotcha. I've known Green for about 5 years now. Second time at one of his islands. Really? When was that? 2 years ago when he bought Turtle Atoll. Turtle Atoll, Bill said, remembering the stink the environmentalists made. There was a reason it had the name Turtle. It was a spawning ground. Green had promised to protect the wildlife, but there were rumors the turtles were already gone. What was that like? Russ's grin widened, and he took another sip from his scotch. Rough the first day while they worked out some kinks at the main house, but they managed to get them fixed. Of course, that trip had a lot more people than this one. How many were there? Ellen asked. Russ gestured to the boat. 3 of these stacked to the gills with people. It's a 5-hour ride from the nearest mainland harbor. He waggled a finger. But for a no-holds-barred lost weekend, it was worth it. Week-long hangover? Ellen asked. Autumn chuckled and put her arm around Russ's waist. They have oxygen on the island. It helps you recover. Ellen looked nonplussed. Russ laughed. Yes, oxygen, just like at the bars in Vegas. Wakes you up and knocks that hangover right out. Bullshit, Bill thought. He wasn't going to say it, but he knew that claim had been busted more than once. But if the stuff made Russ feel better, he'd let it lie. Sure. Ellen looked over the ocean as though searching for more man-of-war. If the other is Turtle Island, what's the name of this one? Russ chuckled and swirled the scotch in the crystal tumbler. Just plain old Green Island. Something about the crabs here. He leaned in conspiratorially. The kind you eat, not the other kind. I figured, Bill said, a little disgusted. Russ leaned back with an idiot grin and drunkenly swayed. Guess I need to slow down, he said softly. Autumn nodded. Please, you'll need a nap before lunch. True, Russ said. He looked past Bill to the water. So blue. Autumn flashed an apologetic smile. Come on, Russ, let's sit down. Sure, Russ said, and she led him to the aft couch. Ellen blinked twice. Can't decide whether or not I like him. Me neither. Bill put an arm around her waist. Still better than Philip. By miles. How old do you think she is? Who, her? Bill moved his head to the side toward the couch. Ellen nodded. Probably 25? Liar, Ellen said, frowning. She can't be a day over 22, if that. Great, now she thinks Russ is a pedo. You can't know that, Bill said. She's probably... Doesn't matter much now, does it? He blinked. Huh? She gestured to the ocean. International waters. No law here except whatever the captain of the boat says and the owner of the island says, which means there probably aren't a lot of rules on the island. Hadn't thought about that. But that doesn't mean much anyway. Most of the resorts let you get away with anything short of murder. Maybe, but at least there's some local law enforcement around the corner. She looked anxious again. I'm glad there's only 6 of us. Well, more at the island. Green said they have cooks, a maintenance person, and housekeeping. That has to be at least 5 or 6 people that aren't on this boat. I'm willing to bet they either live there year-round or were dropped off earlier this week. Probably right, she said. But I bet the staff are less unruly than the passengers. God, I hope so. The pair behind us are taking their time. Philip and Janet seem to be drinking everything in sight. Which is good. Bill nodded to the flybridge. They can pass that up there and leave us the hell alone for the rest of the trip. Fat chance, Ellen murmured as the sound of unsure footsteps echoed down the short stairwell. Philip nearly lost his balance on the last stair, found his footing, and swayed drunkenly. Janet came up behind him, her steps a little less wobbly. Where'd you go? Philip slurred. Here, Russ said, the end of the word dipping into a burp. Where else would we be? Oh, right. Philip locked his arm around Janet's shoulder as if to prop himself up. Brandon said we should see the island in a few minutes. Philip belched loudly. Probably best at the bow or the flybridge. Then why'd you come down here? Autumn asked. Philip's face went blank for a moment before his eyebrows crinkled together. To see if you wanted to come to the bow. And? Russ asked. Philip grinned sheepishly. And we finished the tequila. Brendan's getting us another bottle. Jesus, Bill thought. We've been on the boat for 3 hours and already killed a bottle? He and Ellen exchanged a glance. They were drinkers, sure, but that was only reserved for Fridays, Saturdays, and the occasional midweek foray. They rarely got more than buzzed. Compared to the other 4, he and Ellen might as well be teetotalers. Philip turned to Bill and Ellen. You guys need drinks? Ellen raised her partially full vodka tonic. We're fine, thanks. Okay. Russ, Autumn? I'm on a break, Russ said, crossing his arms and dipping his head. A moment later, he seemed to be snoring. Bill almost laughed. He wasn't sure if Russ had passed out or was just shining Philip on. Either way, the confused, bewildered look on Philip's face was priceless. He okay? Philip asked Autumn with drunken concern. She nodded and put her arm around Russ's shoulder. He's fine. We were up late last night and the jet lag's killing both of us. Just need a nap or 2. Oh, Philip said. He blinked a few times before locking eyes with Janet. He's taking a nap. You want a nap? Sure, she said. The pair of them walked inside the main cabin and disappeared. I hate that guy, Russ mumbled between bouts of snoring. Ellen broke out laughing. Bill and Autumn joined her a moment later.